I'm not sure if I look forward to my talk, but yes. It's more of a show and less of a case, and no results as far. It's really very much, as I also wrote in the abstract, a work in progress. Very much focused on progress. We are building this, and I'll present just one tiny little part of what of this study that we are sort of developing, where we have more data, specifically rat data, and some sort of analysis of those as well. And I would like to discuss really with you how to continue with the data creation, what material more we could need, what other questions we might want to ask, and how to approach that whole kind of quite messy situation that we are also interested in keeping messy, or sort of making sense of this mess as well, that we can see here, what I will shortly talk about more. And some of it we will be able to talk about here, but some of it I would we can talk about later to also make sure that we can have conversations the way we want to have them. So, tracing the climate change counter movement across platforms, reflections on the role of search engines. And what I will present is a collaboration with my colleague Björn Ekström and some others as well, but mostly Björn Ekström. It is, just to give you some context, because I always think it's important to understand what is the wider context of a project, of a research interest. It is part of a large research program that is called MISTRA Environmental Communication. It's one of those quite multi-stakeholder, transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary, many universities involved kind of research program with several sort of sub-packages, and one of those is the one that I lead. It's called Information, Cultures, Data and Technology in Environmental Communication. And in that, we have a sort of an overarching interest in how data, as an imaginary, but also in more like concrete terms, is created, shared, and assembled and reassembled across different applications, services, but also people, organizations, and the multitude of other actors, depending on which sort of case we're looking at specifically. And we do that in order to identify and understand potential opportunities, but also challenges for how we create meaning on the environment, and from that, how environmental governance can be developed and structured. We also want to provide insights into environmental meaning making in very situated practices that involve database technologies. We'll look at one in a little while. And we want to also provide, of course, critical analyses of the constantly changing socio-technical conditions for environmental meaning making in our data-fied information cultures, and to also help identify, so we have a more normative sort of element here as well, areas for potential regulatory or educational interventions, not necessarily develop those interventions, but identify spaces or frictions and areas where they might be useful or where they could come in. So, my colleagues in this in our team in this of our work package, the researchers, I want to name them or show you their names. Here we are a group of researchers from SSLIS, the Swedish School of Library and Information Science, coming from mostly sort of an interest in the social study of information. Then from the Swedish University for Agricultural Sciences, where we have people from the environmental social sciences and also ecology. And finally from the University of Texas, Austin, with Shiv Ganesh, who is a communications scholar. And we have some partners and collaborators, for instance, the Library Association, the Wikimedia Foundation, and Search Studies research group at Hamburg University of Applied Sciences. So, and also the Environmental Protection Agency in Sweden and a textile company and fashion company, Nudie Jeans. So you see, it's quite a diverse kind of group with diverse stakeholders and partners and interests. So more specifically, zooming in on the actual case that sort of involves RAT technologies and search engine data, is we have three different sort of tasks. Where one concerns environmental apps, weather apps, water apps, things like that, how they produce and acquire meaning in people's practices and everyday lives. Everyday people when you go for a run, but also farmers, whatever. And task 2, which focuses on environmental social governance and communication practices in sustainability certification systems, in sort of blockchains to trace, for instance, where cotton is coming from and how it sort of ends up in the store and so on. And task 3, which is really the main thing for today, is where we examine, or try to examine, attempt to examine, want to examine data journeys in the context of advocacy coalitions. That's also groups of actors promoting shared societal or policy aims. So, but what aims do they have? And this is the aim. This is the issue of these sort of advocacy coalitions. This is the advocacy area that sort of we are interested in studying specifically. Namely, how is the informational texture of advocacy issues associated with opposition to the so-called green transition constituted by the interrelation with other often contested issues, and of course, particularly online, or mainly online. And we approach this by aiming to analyze how data fragments are joined together, how fragments of facts, of conspiracy narratives, of anecdotal and other forms of evidence, and so on, and how they are joined together, and then to map how or whether, or if at all, opposition to green transition initiatives links to the climate change counter-movement. So that is the one that I'm interested in now, right? There are other sort of ways in which this is manifest, but this is the one that is at issue today here. And then there are some concepts that we are working with, climate obstruction rather than only climate denial, where it's a wider, more inclusive understanding of ways in which climate adaptation, mitigation, and so on is delayed or blocked or even denied, of course. Advocacy coalitions that I've already talked about, information infrastructures from a more SDS perspective, where it's infrastructures are technical, but they're also part of practices, and they are practices and involve different actors and configurations from Lucy Suchman. But the main concept that I think is of interest here now is data journeys, and that is how data sort of travels between applications, or is moved across, moves by itself, I don't know, is pushed into different situations, settings, and gains new meanings, and takes and acquires meaning in these sort of travels, and then moves this meaning along, and also joins different groups and interests together. And search engines do play a very important role here, but they are often forgotten somehow, or they have a sort of a glue function, if you want, somehow. They have all other functions as well, but they also have this sort of gluing it all together function, amongst other things. And there's one question right here, journey, travel. It's a very suggestive metaphor. The question is, though, if it's the correct one for what we want to sort of say, or what we see as well. So maybe putting us in a different, giving us wrong images. Journey of like you move from one place to another and then you don't leave that much behind. Maybe the journey of a forgetful traveler, maybe it would be more accurate. But it could be also like, it's about proliferation, it could be shedding, what is going on now, branching. And the question is like, does data settle down and start families in different areas? And then, these kind of, what's the lives that sort of are engendered here? What is happening? But just that's me branching out now, because I've been thinking a lot about what is it we see when we study how data sort of is said to travel, actually. But still, follow the data somehow, whether it sort of stays behind and gets and procreates, or if it just moves on and forgets nothing, leaves no traces, is what we do. And practically, what does that mean? Well, Google search results, Google Trends results, Bing and Copilot, whatever results, answers, prompts, DuckDuckGo, of course, all these kind of search engines. But also, where do they lead? And how do they end up there in the first place? Things like podcasts and podcast platforms are very important and not very well studied at all, for instance. Wikipedia, Wikidata, Facebook, TikTok, Reddit, in the IMDb, and whatever, you name it, whatever comes up, we try to follow it to a certain point to kind of paint the picture of these traces of the climate change, of the opposition to the green transition in different ways, for different reasons. I mean, for good reasons, bad reasons, whatever, other reasons, anything in between. So, and we needed entry points for that, and these are our entry points. We have ideas, quite concrete ideas, also about the concrete entry points, but I just put the names of the fields, sort of the areas of interest in. That's agriculture and food, the energy transition, wind power or solar, and that kind of discussion. And then also climate change itself, in a way, and climate denial and obstruction, and the climate change counter movement specifically as well. And here we focus on one. We have as a seed, you could say, like a movie. It's called Climate the Movie. It came out in March. It was released big on YouTube, Vimeo, but mostly YouTube. Produced also for that platform. It's an hour and a half long or something. So, and it's like it presents itself like a documentary. With a lot of talking heads, and a lot of the people have titles and functions and are professors and this and that. And they are climate deniers in different ways, but together it really paints a picture of quite a denialist and also slightly conspiracy-driven narrative of climate change being either invented, made up, a hoax, or not that, or happening but not that dangerous, whatever. It's like, but it's very classic climate denial, actually, an old version of it that's been around for a long time, and that is sort of having a renaissance right now, which is interesting and a bit worrisome. So, but we use that film and see where it leads us, right? Just as a, so that's the film. On YouTube, I think that is what it looks like. So, one of the reasons, this is if you can see that is screenshots from podcast, from the transcription of a podcast. And I said it has a renaissance, this kind of movie. It went really viral, and there were. So it was everywhere, being shared a lot, being subtitled in different languages a lot as well, and so on, being discussed a lot, being also rebuked a lot, of course, and sort of debunked. But here you have a conversation in a podcast by the podcast host and with the podcast host, and the quotes are here from the guest in this podcast. They are both quite well-known people, but I still will not name them here. And they talk about many things, amongst other things, this Climate the Movie film, and the hope that it will, and sort of the discussion that now, after the pandemic, it sort of has a much better chance than the earlier film of the same director that came like in 2007, and that also was successful, but not like that successful. It has a different way of spreading because the pandemic brought new audiences into the sphere of people questioning the system and kind of mainstream truths and sort of established knowledge institutions and so on. So you can see that. So he talks of a chain reaction that sort of happened with a lot of other people they never thought about these things before. They are brought into the whole story. So that is sort of one of the reasons why what we study as well, why we study what we studied, because we can see that. But here we have also sort of confirmation from within the sort of area of climate denial, that this is also what is aimed for in a way. So this kind of spreading and tying different communities into and making them aware of this climate skeptic position is also quite strategically happening. So this is part of, for instance, will be part of our material, like the podcasts and different ones, but a lot of on the level of the metadata. Which podcasts? Where are they? Which countries? Which platforms are they released on? What sort of knowledge organization terms are used to kind of organize them in the system to make them searchable and be found in whatever it could be, Spotify or all of these specific podcast platforms. So, and also the ones that come up in Google search, of course. So this is something that I just want to talk about briefly as well, because that is Copilot. And if I ask Copilot about that, tell me about Climate the Movie, the answer I got was horrible, because it sort of made an impressive-looking summary of the first few search results, and all of the first few search results came, of course, from the producers of this film and from the IMDb and YouTube and so on, and sort of presents the same argument. It is presented as a sort of a serious documentary that presents a different perspective on climate change debate, and then it really highlights and gives the people's status and so on. Tried that in different ones, in different ways, in different languages and so on. It's always the same kind of answer that you get. That's not hallucinations. That is retrieval augmented generation. That is sort of it is summaries of the actual search results in Bing. And it's sort of in different variations. Then you also get, you get sources. We follow those as well. Of course, for that IMDb, and so that is a new form of search engine that does not hallucinate in that sense. In that case, they are right. It's all very correct technically, but it's still very wrong factually and also societally. Well, not really in the interest of society. So this was so upsetting that I wrote a piece about that. And then I moved on and started and sort of did the data, went back to the actual case. So here we also see that's what it's based on. It's these kind of IMDb data. So all of that will also be part of that it travels in this way, right? It does get reviews, it gets numbers. In IMDb, it gets sort of high ratings and low ratings, but mostly high ratings, and that kind of feeds then into the search engine. It comes up higher in the ranking, and then in the GPT, it sort of also gets promoted in that way. We will also study, of course, Wikipedia, maybe Wikidata, we don't know yet. It's also a reason for that is because it's interesting in itself, but also because there's a clear sort of correlation between how things are represented. There seems to be a clear correlation between how things are represented in AI-generated summaries, but also in that, of course, Wikipedia, as we know, is not as prominent, but still very prominent in most search engine results pages. So you can also see that how these sort of things, how Wikipedia is edited, there's sort of small wars about the status of that film as well. So RAT then. We, of course, have quite a big material. We tried different ways of compiling and creating the data for the Climate the Movie RAT element to see what we can get, and also to be, well, not realistic, but somehow representative for the actual searches that are being carried out in relation or suggested in relation to this movie. And that is just two screenshots for what we did with the help of Sebastian as well. Here, so we created search terms to search for by using Google Trends. 4 different countries, 6 different countries: Germany, Italy, Sweden, France, the Netherlands, and Poland. And chose all the top related queries up to a certain cutoff point, and the top rising related queries all at the same date, kind of about a month or month and a half after the release of the film. And then fed that into the RAT. And this is what now we are sort of, Björn and I, we are analyzing that. So of course, topmost positions, what we see, and the topmost domains is Wikipedia. So So our idea to sort of also include Wikipedia is even backed up by that. You can see it's a glue. It's gluing things together. You have very diverse, that's for everything, right? It's very diverse, but it's also, there are a lot of those obvious things like the FN, but there are also a lot of, and then databases of climate denier, sort of mapping or keeping track of climate denialism, like Deep Smog, but also others that are sort of promoting it more and so on. So what you see here is like the 20 topmost domains at position 10 here for Google Search and DuckDuckGo. You can see this. And Google Search is much more, well, mainstream results than DuckDuckGo. You can see that for Google Search you have the Bloomberg and New York Times, and for DuckDuckGo you have slightly less well-established sources. So, and then we're also working on how can we represent or what can we see by doing network graphs for that. And here we can see, I'll zoom in soon, you can see a bit more. There's a network graph of search results and queries from RAT. So it's how sort of queries relate to results, and you can see certain clusters actually, which is nice. And here is one of those clusters zoomed in. And that is a close-up view of the cluster of modularity class 7. And you can see the queries, how they relate to search results in one of those clusters. And here you can see that you have, these are sort of sciencey web pages that are interesting coming up here, but not like science, but sort of policy and a good mixture of opposition, like denial and opposition to denial kind of websites where that is negotiated. You have the Daily Skeptic, but you also have Net Zero Watch. So it's a very different kind of, but they sort of appear in the same cluster. So you can see sort of that happening here. They are the most prominent terms in terms of titles and descriptions as well, which says something. We will do topic modeling as well, I think, for the descriptions or maybe the pages as well, to get more out of that. But it does already tell you something, like the title terms are like companies, like Bosch, Michelin, or Wiesmann, and so on. And the description terms is more about the medium, really, but like the film as such. And that is also keyword density. It's also something that Björn is looking into. And here you can see there's differences between DuckDuckGo and Google as well, and also between the countries to a degree. And from that you can make sort of, you can also see that they have different sort of positions in the different countries. So in Italy, for instance, you can see that the density of the YouTube queries is very high. Probably that it was sort of extremely sort of connected to something happening there at the time that probably made it particularly interesting to search for that there. But you can also see some differences, of course, between Google and DuckDuckGo and the different countries. And then we will then go on with that for future work that is search engine related. We will use, I think, we will analyze the data more. Of course, we will probably generate new data built on that as well. We are also, most of all, we are looking into using the retrieved results, like the most important ones for the different countries, the most retrieved results that are most often in the highest position, to build to use it in a web corpus curation tool called Hive, or UFE, it's France, French, based in France, to see, and with that you can harvest the links in the web pages and see how they interlink as well, to see what kind of issue spaces we can create from there. And some other, and of course we will work more with the actual RAT data as well. And there are many other questions, of course. But one of the most interesting ones that I think maybe we can discuss more is also how to trace the query results into different social media and follow it through the respective recommender systems. Because this is a search that doesn't lead to an opening time in an analog space, but it leads to most often a web page that has the video, which is most often YouTube, not only, but often, or it's like a discussion on Reddit, or it's TikTok and so on. And then once you're there, if you watch the movie at all, you might stay on this. What other sort of recommendations will you encounter? What is the issues that are sort of connected by the algorithms and by how you use it, of course, that appear as most likely to be suggested, because that also tells you something about what other kind of communities, or issues, advocacy coalitions are brought into this space and are connected to that kind of way of climate denial. And it's of course also advocacy coalitions that oppose climate denial and work sort of for climate adaptation and so on. But there are many ways in which we will go, and we will also sort of not just start from, or we have not just started from the RAT and the search engine results, but we also have already started sort of other entry points, and then also feed it into search engines to see where that kind of ends up. So this is the question that is probably most related to this workshop today, and the others are more wider question, more sort of general question that probably we will also have time to talk about, that have to do with sort of conspiracy cultures or advocacy coalitions, and what are data traces even, what are they made of, and how do they what lives do they have, and how do they die, if at all? These are also questions that I'd be very interested in talking about. And with this, thank you very much.